That the other bit was good. So why do we need a license, right? Because 32 states require it, and we want to make sure that you are practicing safely and within the legal bounds, right? For the state of Washington, there are two legal binding issues that you need to have a license. Since I think it's since 2001 that licensing has been on the books, and many people got grandfathered in, but that is not going to be the case for you who are just rising out of the ranks of undergraduate. So there will be a slightly different vibe for you. So now that we know why you want to get a license and why it's important, let's talk about how, right? And this is kind of a stepwise process that you guys are just getting to the point of being able to start thinking about taking the test. Now, you must meet the educational requirements. And what does that mean? What educational requirements are we going to need? You need to have 36 hours at upper division, and that's quarter hours at 300, 400 level classwork. So you're pretty much going to hit that by going through and getting a BS here at Eastern. And you need to have 21 unduplicated hours from the list below. And I went through and grabbed some of the classes that many of you are actually in, including things like, people just took hydrogeology, right? 470. Well, that would tick off the hydrogeology requirement. Many of you are going to take Professor Nezat's geochemistry class. Right there, there's 5 credits worth of geochemistry. Some of you are probably in structural geology. I think you can only let that one count once, but needless to say, you are going to hit the mark basically by finishing your degree here at Eastern and have the educational requirements that are needed to take the ASBOG. Now, if you have, maybe say you're coming back and you're doing a second part of like an environmental science geology, and you've got a fall quarter. If you've completed all of this coursework before you graduate, you can still take the ASBOG test. And I would strongly encourage you to do so because the material is fresh. And just like radioactive decay, the knowledge will decay in your brain. It happens to all of us. I have to go back many times over to refresh myself on things that I have learned in the geologic past. My geologic past is still longer than many here. So you can take this stuff. You can take the ASBOG test before you graduate. So what that would look like is applying, going through the process of submitting an application to the Department of Licensing, studying, and then taking the exam. So you would then need to start thinking about when you're going to plan the exam. And this is important, right? You have about a 3-month window that you need to apply before you take the exam. So if you haven't finished certain classes or the grades haven't come through, you might want to wait until grades have actually been added to your transcript before you send off your transcript to the Geologic Licensing Board to make sure that you have in your back pocket the appropriate educational requirements. So again, you need 3-month lag period, and the tests are in both the spring and the fall. So if you were to graduate this summer or in June, you would all be well capable of pulling together your testing requirements and sending it off to ASBOG for the fall examination for the fundamentals of geology. This is the process in which you are going to get your geologist in training getting going here. So on that test, here's the breakdown of the test. The majority of it is just general field knowledge. We've got mineralogy, SED, geomorph and surficial processes, hydrology, engineering geology, economic and resource geology, as well as bits of structure. So most of these are things you're going to hit in your coursework. The economic and resource geology, we have probably all touched on them in classes, but that might be a place where you need to focus your studies. So just a reminder, you need basically a 3-month window to get all your materials in. So I think these are the deadlines. It was like October 1st was a test, and you had to have your materials in on July 10th of that same year. So if you plan to take this in October, you would want to be prepared and have already made your application by the beginning of July. All right, so this is where we have to have a little bit of fun. Here are a smattering of questions that are I snagged directly out of a practice test out of the fundamentals. So I'll take, you can unmute yourself if you want to take a crack at the top right question. Dr. Thompson, you're not allowed to answer that one.
Yeah, but my mineralogy folks better be able to answer that.
So would that be D, zinc ores?
That is correct. All right, let's go to the second question. Which of the following make a poor aggregate for use with Portland cement? And again, Dr. Thompson and I sat on a really interesting ASMR, it was a forensic geology talk recently.
Looking at concrete.
Okay, concrete investigations.
Yeah.
Anybody know the answer to that one?
Would it be
I'm going to take a stab because we didn't necessarily talk about which ones would be poor in soils, but I'm going to guess pumice just based on its strength.
Yeah.
I think the pumice would probably be a bad aggregate add, but I think they actually were looking for the addition of a chert because of the ASM. It's like a silicification process that happens within the cement. So yeah, that's one of those things where going through and doing the studying is really going to help. So all right, how about our storage coefficient or storativity in an unconfined aquifer is equal to? Everybody who took groundwater hydrology should get this right.
Would it be specific retention?
Anybody else?
Specific yield?
There we go, specific yield. And remember, that's just for an unconfined aquifer. For a confined aquifer, that is not the case. There's some thickness involved with that process. So these are the type of questions that you would expect to find on a fundamentals of geology. And you don't have to get a 100% to pass this, all right? There are going to be questions that you do not know the answer to, and you'll find best study practices and how to most efficiently take a multiple choice test actually comes into play, unfortunately, as much as your geologic knowledge is going to come into play. Some of the things that we have here on campus, I'm actually going to, let me see if I can, I just want to choose virtual background. How about no background? I want to get rid of my background. None. There we go. All right. So this is our study guide. This is a set of practice exams. We have these here on campus, as well as the big beastie study. I mean, it's pretty thick here. And this is for both the fundamentals and the practice of geology exam. So those are resources available here on campus that you can check out. And in fact, we should probably look into getting to the 2015. We only have the 2012 ones. So just noted that recently. All right. So you passed your geologist in training. You're still not a professional geologist yet. Right, you need 5 years of time practicing in a work environment. Grad school can count for up to 2 of those years. You've got to get your degree in there. So again, you have maybe taken the fundamentals test before you got your degree. You still need to finish out your degree and then get those 5 years of work experience working underneath a geologist. Now, this is really important, is that as you progress through jobs, keep track of your advisors, your mentors, your bosses, so that when you go to apply for the geologist, the professional geology licensure, you can add them into the who did you work for, because they ask for verification. So be very, very diligent about keeping your resume and your bosses and all of the things you've done in line as you move forward in geology. All right, so cool. You've done your 5 years, you got your degree. There's Bryce right there. Maybe you were in the lab, maybe you were out mapping geology, maybe you were taking stream water measurements. That's my friend Dr. Strauch in Hawaii, taking some measurements in West Maui. There's a variety of things you can do to obtain those 5 years under a certified geologist. And then you get to take the practice of geology, which is only 110 questions. It's offered at about the same times. The breakdown there has skewed a little bit more to hydrogeology and economic geology, and the emphasis has been placed there just because in industry and in the world of professional geology, those are typically the types of jobs that are have been more in the hip and now. That may change. We may see in the next couple of years a slight shift away from petroleum resources, maybe to natural resources, but that hasn't happened yet, and it hasn't been reflected yet in the practice of geology. So I thought it'd be fun to show you what some practice of geology questions look like. They are definitively much more complex than the fundamentals of geology. So I love this. The second question down here is great. It's just a quick little math problem for you to figure out where the value is. But this is perfect because when we go we have in the past for summer field camp gone to the Montana resources right by the Centennial Pit. This is the exact problem that they're dealing with. They have a porphyritic body of both chalco and molybdenite. They're recovering both, and they're making money out of both resources. One they're potentially making more money out of per ton. So, any interest? Who can answer the top one? The treatment, the acid treatment. Any ideas? Well, I'm seeing an A and a D.
Is it B?
Yeah, it's actually B, right? What you want to do right there, the acid is intended to break up the cementation, potential cementation that you would have, so as to create a clear flow path. You're certainly not going to be able to disinfect the entire formation. That would be impressive amount of acid. And then down here, if you went through the numbers, actually the molybdenum is worth more. It's like $12 to the ton, or yeah, $12 to the weight there versus $9. So the molybdenum is actually the value point right there. But that's the type of question that you would be expected to work through during a practice of geology exam. Okay.
And we'll go to Silver Hill this summer. Tin tungsten mine. Ooh, okay.
Tin tungsten. right? And so they'll set up things differently for you might see that exactly. So you passed. Congratulations. You're a professional geologist, and now you will need to work for 5 years as a professional geologist, dealing with a specific entity in geology, whether that be hydrogeology or engineering geology. And once you've done your 5 years there and met the educational requirements, sometimes it's attending webinars and seminars, a certain number of hours there, you can actually take a specialty exam where you can become a licensed hydrogeologist or a licensed engineering geologist, LEG or LH. You might see that at the back of people's names. I believe Dr. Pritchard has got a PG and an LG as well at the back of his signature.
Oh yeah, it depends on the state. So
what and so that's for our state, right?
Yeah.
Those are two in Washington state that you can get. California has its own specific setup as well that is slightly different. So there are specific requirements, further specific requirements in individual states. All right, let's see if I can get this to go. Can you guys hear that? One sec. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna share again and share computer sound. That's what I needed. I forgot to grab the computer sound.
Hi, Eastern Washington University students. I'm Casey Hannell, our state geologist here in Washington and director of our Washington Geological Survey at the Department of Natural Resources. I'm reaching out to you today at the request of my colleague Nigel, who let me know he's talking to you about how important it is to take your licensing exams and to work towards being a licensed geologist if you want to practice geology here in Washington. We have geologist licensing in Washington because of the significant number of geologic hazards we face. We want to make sure that those that are providing geologic information and assessments for building structures, siting homes, siting hospitals, building schools, those decisions and plans for buildings are all done with quality geologic information and ensuring that there's a standard that is high that people need to meet in order to be able to provide that information. It's much easier to take your Fundamentals of Geology exam as soon as you're qualified to do so after completing your coursework at Eastern. That way, the information is fresh in your mind and you're ready to be on your way to becoming a geologist. After you pass that initial Fundamentals of Geology exam, you become a geologist in training. And after that, you just need to gain 5 years of experience under a licensed geologist. And then you're able to take your practice of geology exam and become licensed here in Washington. And you will be able to contribute fully to making sure we're a safe, resilient, and prosperous community here in Washington that takes geology into everyday decision-making processes. Best of luck on your exams. I'm looking forward to having a new group of geologists here in Washington protecting our communities and helping us make great decisions. Take care and good.
So there you go. There's our state geologist, making sure that you guys understand it's a really good idea to get after this as soon as possible. So I left some links to the application process, the educational requirements, the national ASBOG, study materials, right? We've got a whole bunch of flashcards. Oh, I have flashcards here in my office. They're a little bit old, but shockingly, we haven't lost out too much. What do we got here? What can be determined by the shape of ripple marks? Right, things like that. That hasn't changed. So we have flashcards, we have the study resources here. This is something for you guys to look into, maybe during the summer, or maybe while you're in field camp with Chad, with Dr. Pritchard. I'm going to stop sharing. And what I'll do is I'll make this PowerPoint available to everybody so you guys can walk through it on your own, mainly because the last bit has the all the links that you can then access and understand the timing of when all of this would go down. So, who's got questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
So I am applying to grad school, fingers crossed that I get in. But as far as taking the fundamentals, is that something that I should do before I get into grad school, a master's program, or should I wait until after, considering the fact that I might be relocating states?
Well, I think my first thought is that it's always going to be a good idea, because 32 out of the 50 states are going to require this, depending on what you want to do. And even if you end up in an academic field, there are possibilities to use a professional geology skills outside of that academic field. So I think it's always a good idea to take it as soon as possible. You can take both of them in one go. You can take like the FG and the PG all at once you're ready in 5 years. But that again becomes slightly more challenging, because you have to study for 2 different exams at the same time, potentially while you're working.
So then, as far as taking it though, would I wait until I get into the different state, or it's okay to be certified in one state for the fundamental and then take the professional elsewhere?
I think that the ASBOG transfers once you've
Okay.
so there is the ability for what's called reciprocity, just like legal lawyers get this, where you can get certified from the bar in multiple different states. You can come into Washington with a PG from California and apply for reciprocity, where you get your PG that way. I believe once you've taken the ASBOG, the fundamentals, that you would probably be able to transfer that across, because it's held by the national organization.
Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions? Everybody feel good about those? I mean, everyone should come have a crack at doing some of these questions, because it humbled me last night a couple of times. I'm like, oh God, I've forgotten this.
Hey, Chad, what's your license number? PG.
Number 1. No, I don't. It's upstairs. It's like,
I'm 185.
yeah, I want to say I might be 3,000 something, I think.
And I just had to renew mine. And I haven't heard back from them yet, but I had to renew because of my consulting job. And I also had to renew my business LLC. So I handed out about $500 last month.
And I did
because I let
talk to,
things slip.
I called them not that long ago about the hydrogeology license too. I like that video, by the way, Nigel. They were, and they're kind of closed down right now. I think they canceled the last big exam, but I mean, if you apply for it for the next one, like what Nigel was saying, by July for October, you should be good to go. And hopefully by then they'll actually have it open in Spokane as well, as opposed to just Olympia. It's pretty common now that they'll have an option in Spokane.
Yeah, because it's a bit of a pain in the butt to go across to Olympia for it. But
It also costs money to take the tests, right?
yeah, the test is $100, and I think it's $100 for. I think you can take the FG and the PG for that $100. I think.
There's the
And
registration
I
fee
think-
and then the cost for the test.
And
Yeah,
then the
there's 2 different
license
fees.
costs $100 a year.
Yeah.
Unless you're late by 3 months, and it goes up to $200.
Maybe that was the reinstatement.
There's been a couple of years in Idaho where you didn't have to pay at all because they had, for some reason, they had an excess of money there. They weren't giving it to their schools. I don't know. But I did get
Yeah.
reciprocity to Idaho. It's pretty easy.
And you can also work in Idaho with a Washington state license as long as you don't go over a certain number of days. I did some work in Idaho and somebody took it upon themselves to complain to the geologist Washington board saying that I was acting out of state, and I had to go and prove that I was not working there for a long period of time. So why somebody would have reported me is beyond me. I still haven't found out who did it in spite.
That's crazy. But there are some DOT, or like not DOT, but Idaho Department of Transportation jobs that require you to have the actual license. I did some jobs with Bill Capal, who's an alumni from here. He's a great guy. His nephew used to teach computer science here.
Tom Capal.
Yeah. Bill's funny though, man. Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
I'm trying to get him to come out next year.
Hey, hopefully you all saw the announcement for Darlene's presentation on Monday. Make sure you attend that.
Yeah. It was put up on the Inside Eastern too. So.
On all
Very
the
cool.
things it was put. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chelsea.
It's going to be well attended.
I hope you don't mind I'm announcing it today in lab too, darling. For 121.
It's fine.
It's good. So yeah, as we move towards the spring, if people do want to check out the resources, we can accommodate that. There is currently only one book. I've got my own book in my office. I think some others do as well, but it's a little bit old. But we can get you guys those resources. And I think the department might splurge and try and buy the most recent Reg review to have as a resource as well. It'd be a good, really fun thing as a geology club to get together and, like flashcard each other. I remember studying with, I actually was studying as I was driving across the state to take the test. I seem to remember. But studying with fellow grad students when I was at Western.
Yeah, you definitely want to get the updated version because they change, especially for less so for the fundamentals, but the second test, because they change the emphasis to go along with where the majority of geologists are getting their jobs. So when I took it about 5-6 years ago, it was all petroleum geology. And I was like, I did hydrogeology and soils engineering. Where are those questions? So they do try to balance, but know that there is emphasis in where the current job market is too. So definitely a good idea to do some studying.
I remember being absolutely stumped at taking the licensing exam in Maine. It had questions on subject material that I had never even studied in college. That was in 1985 or so.
Yeah, so to back up what Nigel was saying, I remember taking it too, and I had never taken a class in petroleum geology, but because I'd used that reg review book, I had done the chapter on petroleum reserves, and so I was able to calculate it, and felt pretty confident. So it's definitely a good idea to read through. I mean, even if you're working at that time, is just to go back at night and read a chapter, take the study questions, and take a break. A couple days later, read the next chapter, do the study questions, and practice. It's definitely worth the while. Yeah.
How many total questions are there on the GIT and the professional licensing exam?
140 on the GIT and 110 on the PG, on the practice. So, and I think you get 3 hours. That seems to be.
The second one can take quite a while. You want a bunch of time because there's, yes, it might be multiple choice, but there's a lot of calculations stuff you have to do for each part of questions.
Kevin asked a question. Do you think rare earth metals are going to be an increasing emphasis? Those are considered critical. And so I would not be surprised to see questions dealing with rare earth elements and rare earth metals and the minerals like bastnasite and so forth.
Yeah. And just as we're getting going here, we're getting close to February. Some of our internships are starting to be closed out for the year. So make sure that if you want to apply for internships, and I was just like, I had just been on the GSA, the GeoCore program. So I'll put that in the chat. I think that deadline is the beginning of February. And in there, in the GSA job board, they're speaking of rare earths. There's a job ad for a lithium internship, a lithium mining internship, which I believe is with Elon Musk's crew. But there's the GeoCore link. That those close out February for summer internships. I applied for one of those back when I was an undergraduate and did not get one, but enjoyed the process of learning about GeoCore. And there are a myriad of other internship opportunities as well out there, but just something that deadlines are coming up for.
Yeah, especially state and federal internships will be right now because that's when their budget, it takes a while for the budget to come through. So like Washington jobs, WAJA jobs, or USA jobs websites, be good to check.